Hi and welcome to The Courageous Collective, the podcast where we celebrate diverse women who dare to do things differently. I'm Rupa Bharadva, a copywriter and communication specialist. I work with women entrepreneurs to help them get clear on their brand messaging, and I help them become more visible to their target customers using PR.
And I'm Vardeep Edwards, founder of The Branding Fox, a design consultancy that supports women in business with their branding and design needs. After working in corporate roles, we both took the leap into self-employment and created our own businesses where our skills and experience could really shine. But something we both noticed was the lack of women that looked like us at events, on speaker panels and in the media.
Which is why we created the Courageous Collective podcast. This is our platform to celebrate and champion diverse women who are smashing it in their businesses. In each episode, we speak to a female founder about the story behind their business. We explore their inspirations, the challenges they faced and how they've dealt with them. And we talk about what they're yet to achieve.
Welcome to the Courageous Collective and enjoy today's episode. Hi and welcome to the Courageous Collective. In today's episode, we're focusing on PR and the power of promotion. PR or public relations is a topic we hear a lot about, especially as business founders. But what exactly is it? Do you need an agency and therefore lots of money to invest in it, or can you do it yourself? And what are the benefits of using PR for your own business? And who better to talk to us about PR than Rupa, my co-host, who has worked in multiple comms and PR roles throughout her 20-year career, as well as working in large UK companies. Nowadays, Rupa is self-employed and works with small business founders to supercharge their comms so that they can promote their businesses with confidence and clarity. Well, Rupa, I'm very excited for today's episode and looking forward to the tips and advice that you can give us.
Hello, it feels weird being on this side. I don't know. I'm used to being on that side. So
Absolutely. Okay, so I've got some questions I would like to know as a small business founder and around what PR is. So one of the first things I had was, how do you define PR?
I think PR, or public relations, as PR stands for, it's one of those things which we hear about a lot, but often we don't really know what it is. And I think that adds to the mystery surrounding PR. There's a lot of smoke and mirrors around the practice and what it is. But really simply, it's about managing the public's perception of a brand, person, or business. So if you think about it this way, everything that we do in the public domain, whether that's on social media, whether we've been quoted in an article, maybe we've spoken at an event, or maybe we've won an award, these are all things that can be considered PR, as can having conversations online with your customers or sending out emails to your clients. These are all things that can be considered to be PR, which sometimes surprises people because they think instantly when they hear PR that it's about being in the media or it's about being quoted in like the newspaper or something like that, which it is, but it's so much more than all those things. And I think as business founders, we're probably doing a lot of these things already, but we just don't consider them as being PR. So when you are convincing your audience to buy from you, the key thing is always to build relationships. And I think that is the same across any type of PR that you're doing. You want to be clearly known for what you're doing. And in order to do that, you need to build relationships and connections, whether that's with your dream clients, whether that's forming alliances with other businesses and brands, or stakeholders. You might be a person who operates a business in a local community, and actually building connections with maybe the local council, for example, is a great way for you to then, build your business and kind of leverage that relationship so people get to know who you are. So hopefully that's a little bit of a easier definition of what PR is. So essentially everything that we're doing in the public domain, with regards to our brand, how we operate as a person and as a business.
Yeah, it's a really good way of looking at it, isn't it? And it's interesting that you say that we're probably already doing some of those things already. Okay. So why is PR important for businesses?
It's a really good question. And I think the best way to kind of explain it is PR can be part of your already existing marketing strategy or mix. I don't think it's necessarily a standalone thing that you would do. It's important because what it helps you do is build brand awareness, it helps you build customer loyalty, it helps you authentically connect with your customers. I think it's a good way to shout about the great things that you're doing in your business. But equally, and this is the thing that sometimes businesses sometimes forget about, is that PR needs to be part of your crisis management plan, particularly if and when things go wrong, because that can happen frequently sometimes. So to give you an example, say you are a products-based business and suddenly the shipping company that you work with goes out of business, goes bust, and it kind of happens overnight. You need to be able to communicate quite quickly and clearly with your customers to tell them, A, what's happening, if and how they're impacted, and what you're going to do to support them. So maybe it's reimbursing them, maybe it's giving them free shipping the next time that they buy from you. The key is that you don't want to lose their custom. You don't want to necessarily make promises that you can't keep either. So it's really important that you're clear on what action you're taking in order to communicate with them and in order to make them feel part of the picture so they understand what's going on. This isn't about pulling the wool over anyone's eyes. I think it's really important to just state that from kind of the outset. I think PR is about being transparent. It's about, ensuring that your clients, your stakeholders, the people that you work with, whether that's your employees or maybe your colleagues, they 100% know what's happening. It's not, there's no surprises. There's no kind of hidden traps or anything like that. It's being really clear with them. And I think the final reason why PR can be important for businesses is because at the heart of it, PR is about storytelling and telling stories about your business. It's a great way to engage your audience and get them talking about your business or your brand, making them feel part of your business or brand. But also, I think it's a great way to connect with people. We hear the phrase, people buy from people all the time. But I think in order to get somebody to buy from you, you have to be able to tell them why they should buy from you. What is it about you? What is it about your business? And I think this is the other thing. When sometimes we talk about PR, business founders might think, oh my God, I don't want to talk about my life. I don't want to, give away too much. I don't think it's about that. I think it's about maybe giving a little sneaky peek into your life. You can talk about things, but you don't need to go into the detail of maybe say how an influencer would talk about, their life. So I think you can have that distinction.
That's so interesting. You're talking about the crisis management as well, because I imagine that's part of the trust that you build with your customers as well, and they've got to buy into you as a business and the brand first and foremost to know that you're going to look after them. And the fact that you've even put that in place just goes to show, doesn't it, that you've put their interests first as well and what their needs might be around such a situation.
Definitely. And I think, you can just look in the press and you can see, a plethora of brands that have either got it right or really, really wrong. So, for example, the Post Office, one of the UK's most trusted brands, and all the news that's come out about their Horizon system and how they've handled, their postmasters and sub postmasters and kind of what they've done. That will then have an impact on brand trust, credibility, and all of those things. So I think it's all interconnected.
Absolutely. And so those are quite large companies. Do freelancers or one-people bands and small businesses need PR as well, do you think?
Yeah, I think that there's definitely an opportunity for PR. Whether you're a freelancer, sole trader, whether you're a small to medium-sized business, I think there's always an opportunity for PR. I think the question is, what is it that you want to achieve first and foremost. Again, go back into the marketing mix. What are you already doing versus what would you like to be doing? I think PR doesn't cost anything necessarily. You don't have to pay for PR, but what it does take is time, energy. You have to be consistent with your PR efforts. And it's not going to happen overnight. I think it's something that you have to work on for quite some time before you might even see results. So I think that it's worth doing, but I think it's worth bearing in mind that it's not necessarily going to be an overnight thing. And actually, when you get one piece of PR, it might not be, the opening of the floodgates to suddenly get lots and lots of customers or, be invited onto the radio, or it's kind of, I think you do PR because you're going to do it for a specific amount of time. I don't think it's something that's going to give you results straight away. So I think that's one thing to be clear about. I think PR can help you set your stall out, and it can make you distinctive from your competitors, because what you're telling the public is going to be very different to maybe what your competitors are telling the public. And the reason for that is because you are you. And sometimes it's quite easy to, again, forget what you stand for and why you're doing what you're doing. So we always come back to your why, your purpose. What is it that you want to gain? What are the objectives before we kind of go into the tactics and the output? So again, something really worth doing. I think the final thing is research and really understand what PR is and whether or not it's an effective strategy for your business. You might just be starting out, and actually it might not be the right time for you yet, because you may have lots of question marks about how you operate as a business, who your clients are, what you want to be known for. Whereas maybe 2-3 years down the track, you might have a better idea of those things, and therefore, PR might be better for you to kind of achieve at that point. So I think it's definitely worthwhile looking into. I don't think you can put all your eggs in one basket and expect to suddenly be featured on every single front page or magazine if that's what you're after. But I think it could be part of more of a broader marketing mix strategy that you're trying to achieve.
So is it important to get your story straight before you start thinking about whether you can use PR for your business?
Yeah, I think you need to be able to confidently and clearly articulate, who you are and what you do. And you need to be able to say it in a way which people understand. And I know that sounds really simple, but the amount of times I've spoken to people about their businesses, and they'll tell me one thing, and then when we will dig a bit deeper, it's actually this other thing that might be, what they're about, or what might be their USP, which they've completely forgotten about, but they've focused on maybe one particular aspect of their service offering. So I think it's evolving. I think it's an ever evolving process. And I think with any form of marketing or communicating, I don't think you're necessarily going to have the answers on day one. I think it's a kind of gradual process, but I do think you need to be able to effectively communicate what you do before you start looking at the tactics and, approaching journalists. Because I think when you start having those conversations, and if you're lucky enough to have your email maybe read by a journalist, they will want things quite quickly, quite often. So you need to be able to have that information and, be able to answer their questions quite quickly as well.
So what is the difference between PR and advertising then?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So PR, you don't pay for PR.
Okay.
If you pay for PR, then it's really advertising, I would say. So when you go for PR, it's a good way to gain credibility and brand awareness, as I said earlier. Whereas advertising, when you're paying for something, that is the distinction. I think you when you build PR, when you want to gain PR, you're building relationships and rapport with journalists or event organizers, maybe with podcast hosts like ourselves. I think it's building that trust and rapport in a different way to maybe advertising, where you would actually be exchanging something, i.e. money. So that's kind of the difference.
So it's more relationship based rather than kind of monetary based. It's interesting. It reminds me of this spam message I got on my Instagram, and it was from some sort of PR company. I don't know if they were legitimate or not. I didn't even look it that much further, but it's a big long message about wanting me to feature my brand and some work on an MSN article with 9 other contributors about personal branding for just $700.
That's nothing. I mean,
So yeah, funny, isn't it?
And that's a really good point, actually, is don't always, I mean, Instagram is brilliant, but we do get lots of spam messages where people will say, I'll promote your business or I'll do this, or, like the one that you got. Do your research is my number one tip. I will always suggest look into who that person is, look into their profile. Don't exchange money, because that's not PR. And if that's what you want to do, you can do that without having to exchange money.
I think it's got a bit of a rep, hasn't it? I think for some PR, or that kind of idea that to get PR it means you're going to have to spend some money. So it's interesting you talk about that you don't really need to, and that's really more the advertising side of things. But I think some of these quick get rich type of get well known type of schemes that are out there do kind of lean into that, don't they? And kind of play on those.
Definitely. And I think the big PR agencies, or there are lots of agencies out there that can provide PR support. Of course, you'd be paying for that support, but I think there's a more affordable way to do it if you're a small business owner. I don't think that you need to shell out lots and lots of money. I think you can start on your own. And, if you need advice and support, there are people like myself out there who can help you with that. I don't think you necessarily need to go in with a big bang budget and basically blow your whole kind of marketing budget for the year with a big agency. I don't think you need to do that anymore.
Okay. So what made you choose this career path? Do you think it's something you always wanted to do?
No, PR was never on the plan. It was never kind of the thing that I wanted to do. So my career has kind of spanned communication, editorial, and kind of writing roles. And funny enough, one of the first, I think, work placements I did at university was for a press office, and that was for my local NHS office. And it was never the plan to do PR. So it was really interesting even then to see kind of the other side of what I was doing as a journalist later on in my life. And actually what I realized is, whether I was doing internal communications, whether I was kind of working as a journalist, essentially I was already doing what I would be doing in PR, except the audience was different. So, sharing news and stories is ultimately what I see as, the role of a PR, and I was kind of already doing that. So when I did go for a PR manager, which was the last role that I did when I was employed, I loved it because I was able to talk about the things that we were doing internally as a firm, particularly around our people, around equity, diversity, and inclusion, and being able to talk about all those tangible things that were making the lives of our employees better. So, more support for menopause, for example, being able to talk about that was really exciting, and to have that featured in the online press, for example, that was incredible. So I think it was never part of the plan, but I think as a result of having now done PR, I can really see the benefits and power of it, particularly for small businesses, because as I said before, I don't think it's always something that's considered as accessible or even affordable for small businesses, but I definitely think it can be.
Yeah, it definitely goes back to that story element, I think, as well, that you were mentioning, because I think when you know what you're about and what's important to you, then you can have that story as part of your PR strategy as well.
Yeah.
So when you were going down this path for PR, did you come across sort of any challenges at any point you're going, right, okay, that's it, it's enough, I'm going to change? You know, what was your journey like?
I mean, challenges, if you work I think in the communications industry generally, I think daily, if not hourly, there are constant challenges. And I think it was interesting to see it from the PR perspective. So I'd always worked in internal communication roles. This is to see it on, from a PR perspective, it was similar challenges, but maybe obviously different stakeholders. I think noise was definitely an issue. We're living in a very noisy world, and internally you may get told that this is a really important story. It needs to kind of be out there and everywhere. Depends on the news agenda, right? Because if there is a change in government or an impending war or, things that are happening overnight, the pandemic, for example, you have no control over that. And I think the news agenda will then impact what, journalists and editors are looking for. So I think being kind of mindful of the noise is definitely a learning. I think really being quite creative and sometimes quite in situations where the message isn't necessarily going to change, but how you communicate that information and be quite creative with that's quite exciting and quite interesting. So the ability to be creative was quite fun, and I enjoyed that. I think being able to just connect really with what we were doing internally to an external audience. And at the time LinkedIn was probably just kind of getting going, and sometimes to see employees share what we were doing externally, that was really great as well, because you get a buzz from that, because you knew that actually when you hear it from the people who our changes internally are impacting, for them to actually share these things on their social media, like that's incredible, and that's what you really want. So I think lots of challenges, but lots of good learning and kind of good experiences to kind of learn from, and actually that are helping me now in working with small business owners as well.
Yeah, that's great that the internal employees are then feel, that they connect with that story and are able to share that as well, because that's good for the business, isn't it? And the brand as well. Yeah. And it just helps to build it. And, rather than the brand or the business always be saying that that's what they're about, to actually have the people within shout about you as well is a great, it's a great way to do it, isn't it? But and what did representation look like then? I know our podcast is all about representation and women of colour. What did it look like in your industry growing up from school, college, and maybe even now as well, if you've got any insights?
I think I studied communication and media studies at university, and we've obviously spoken about this before on the podcast. It wasn't without challenges to go and study that degree. I knew I wanted to write, but I didn't really know the kind of path I was going to go down. And I was lucky that I had really good advice at school, which helped really, I guess, solidify this decision to go and study and pursue communication media studies at university. But even from kind of those initial days, it was a very white, the student population that was in my course were particularly, they were white. A lot of them were quite privileged backgrounds. There weren't very many women like me in that space. And actually, when I did my placement at the health office, I was working in a really busy health office, lots and lots of different people. And I lived, at the time I was in East London, so, quite a diverse place growing up. That's where I grew up as well. So, but the press office was not representative at all. You know, it was led by a man who was there. You know, it was a brilliant team. Absolutely loved it. But yeah, there was very little representation whatsoever. And as I kind of worked my way up throughout my career, you know, I would say that there is definitely diversity out there. And as I kind of worked through different companies, you know, there were definitely moments where I was like, wow, you know, I'm really part of quite a diverse team, you know, part of a diverse organization. But equally, there were also times where I was like, oh, like I'm the only person from an ethnic minority in this room. And actually, I really lent into that. It took a really long time to have the confidence to lean into that. And I'd say probably in the latter stages of my career, I felt more empowered. And that was partly because I was educating myself on the kind of side and kind of reading a lot more, challenging my own bias. And I think when you're in these positions, particularly as comms people, you know, sometimes you will get the opportunity. I mean, you should be given the opportunity to interact with leaders. I would put my opinions, and I would, you know, if I saw something that didn't sit quite right with me, I would always voice my concerns. I might not have done that at the early stages of my career, but definitely do that now, and did at the kind of latter stages of my employed career. And one example is I saw one of the leaders from the business I worked in was speaking at an event. And this particular leader was a white male. And I saw on the kind of panel of speakers, so he had posted like a graphic of all the speakers, and it was like this really great event. You know, it was obviously quite a high profile. And I scanned the picture and I didn't see one woman. I didn't see, you know, another person from, you know, a different ethnicity. It was like, I was just kind of, you know, in awe that this was going to be out there. This event was going to be out there. And this wasn't, you know, 10 years ago. This was only maybe a few years ago. So I sent the leader a message, and I said, look, just to let you know, I think it's great that you're doing this panel, but given that you are speaking, you know, maybe it's an opportunity for you to maybe lobby the organization that you're speaking for, you know, maybe ask and encourage them to maybe look at, you know, other speakers from maybe a different ethnicity, background, you know, gender. And I think that, you know, the leader was appreciative of my suggestion. You know, it wasn't negatively received in any way, or, you know, there wasn't kind of anything like that. They hadn't considered it. And I think when you're in those environments, you know, bringing your perspectives and bringing your different views is really important. And as a result of that, you know, they actually did end up adding another speaker, which happened to be, you know, a woman, which was great. But again, you know, having those different perspectives, particularly when you're, I think, visually, when you can see, you know, and it's not always obvious to everybody, but if you can see it and you feel okay and comfortable to, you know, ask the question, then why not? So yeah, I think as an industry, definitely we are actually quite highly diverse, actually. But I would say probably there's a handful of women who are maybe kind of at the kind of influencer stage and kind of maybe a bit more higher profile. And I definitely think there's more room for others, which is great.
Yeah, I don't know what the stats are in terms of the gender split, for example, or even just, you know, cultural background for people who work in your industry, because that would be interesting, wouldn't it, to see? Because I always imagine, and, you know, this is why I'd need to have more backup as to, you know, that I thought there always seem to be more women working in comms and PR, but that's just my perception. I could be wrong. So it's interesting that was even a first all-male lineup in the first instance as well. But also just going back to your time in the health office and how the people who worked internally were not even representative of the community that they were serving. It's and I see that as well. And it's not to say that it has to, but I do feel, and I think you've just sort of said that as well, you're not taking in enough of a diverse opinion or educating yourself on what's needed for the diversity of the people that you're serving in your community or in your audience or your clients or your customers. And you do kind of get a little bit echo chambered if you're just working with the people who, and it's not always looking like you, but are from similar backgrounds or cultures or thinking or, opinions and ideas and beliefs. And to really have somebody who's different, it's got to spark different ideas and give you different things to think about and that you wouldn't normally have done. So it's so interesting, isn't it, to see that that's not being highlighted. It just goes to show the lack of diversity internally because they just not been made aware of it. So it's great that you were able to make them aware of it. But I agree with you. I think it's taken, even my own experience and some people I speak to in a similar sort of age, I suppose, and point in their career where it's taken now to become aware of it. And I think it's so important to make sure that we are doing our bit for the younger selves who are, I mean, it may be different now. It's, I'm a little bit further along, but, just to make sure that it is being representative and thought about at the younger stage, because I think as a younger person, you don't question some of those things quite as much. And it is important to get diversity, opinions and representation across as well. Especially in events and influencers and the media and that sort of space, because it's what we look up to, it's what we see, it's what we aspire to be like. So it sends a message, doesn't it, I think, otherwise?
Definitely. Yeah, no, I 100% agree. And I think, one example which has just come to me as you were talking, when I did work for the health office, and this shows how long ago this was, I was involved in the flu jab campaign. And at the time it was, encouraging over 65s to get their flu vaccination. It was, it was a fairly new thing at the time. And I remember writing a press release, and this is the time where we didn't have email. We would be faxing. I would be faxing, should I say, faxing over multiple copies of this press release, getting covered in kind of toner and all sorts to local newspapers. And, the area that I was working in was predominantly, South Asian people. And yet we were sending the press release to obviously the local newspaper. So it was the Ilford Recorder and then, kind of various versions of that. But actually, a lot of that South Asian community didn't read that newspaper. So I remember having this conversation with the head of the press office at the time, and I suggested translating the press release into multiple South Asian languages because I knew that there were South Asian newspapers that would pick up this story, but also vitally communicate it to parts of the community that perhaps weren't going to receive this news. And actually, that was only based on my knowledge of, yes, the borough, but also my knowledge of that South Asian community, having come from that community as well and knowing the type of media that was read. So, I 100% agree. And if you don't have that resource within your teams or, I think it can reflect quite poorly on some of the decisions that can be made. And then, we've just talked about brand trust and so on. It can always have a knock-on effect. It's really important.
Yeah, and it's just important to really think about who your end user is rather than assuming that it's somebody like yourself.
Definitely.
Okay, so what about as business owners, if we're starting to think about our own PR, what do we need to start thinking about if we want to go down that path?
I think the first thing I would suggest is consider what your business objectives are first and foremost. So what is it that you want to achieve as a business, why and by when? And I think once you are clear on kind of what you want to do as a business, then you can kind of take it to the next level and think about PR. So, what is it that you want to communicate? Why? What's it going to help you do? What is it that you want your audience to do as a result of that? Before you kind of start thinking about maybe where you want to speak or which podcast you want to go on, I would kind of leave that. And that, I know that's the fun bit, but I think it's really important to do the work and actually be really clear on what it is that you want to achieve before you start kind of going to tactics. And I guess as part of all of that, understanding your purpose, being clear on your brand values, your USP, essentially being able to communicate how you want to be known, what you want to be known for. I think you need to dig a bit deeper as well into kind of the what it is that you do. So I spoke about this a bit earlier when we started talking, but can you very clearly, quickly, in one sentence, explain what you do? And if you can't do that, my suggestion is to just keep asking people, whether that's your children or whether that's, your neighbor. I would just keep asking that question, is it clear? Do they understand what it is that you do? Can they articulate it back to you? Because sometimes people will hear something and articulate it in a very different way to you. I think it's really important also to understand how your customers articulate what you do as well. So being able to talk in their language is, as you know, really important because, by doing that, you connect with them. And you're probably already doing this on maybe your social media or on your website. So being able to kind of very succinctly express what you do in one sentence is really important. I think the other thing is that we're really lucky, we're fortunate, we have things like social media. We have the ability to create content as business founders. So I think something that you can do quite quickly and quite easily is to start seeing yourself as, I guess, as the media yourself, as a content provider. What can you do, and what kind of content can you share which will entice and engage your audience? What content themes are you going to talk about? What do you want to be known for? These are, not necessarily. So, for example, if I was to talk about my business, I work with business founders. I help them talk about themselves confidently on their social media, on their website, on their email marketing. But that isn't actually the thing that I want to necessarily talk about. There might be other things that actually I want to talk about, which do actually lead on to what I actually do. So being clear on what that content is and content themes, I think, and don't wait as well. So if you are clear on what you want to talk about, start talking about it, write blogs, use your Instagram, maybe, once a week, talk about that one particular content theme. And I'll tell you why, because if you speak to a journalist, if you contact a podcast host, for example, if you want to go for an award, the first thing that most people will do is Google you. And if it comes up that actually you're talking about something completely unrelated, you don't even talk about the thing that you have put yourself forward for, well, you've just shot yourself in the foot there. So you can really start, best practice now by actually talking about the things that you want to be known for. And, do Google yourself. That's like, it sounds so obvious, but even just Googling yourself and seeing what comes up when you Google yourself, it's a really good way of kind of seeing what you're known for currently versus what you'd like to be known for.
And is that just Googling your own name, business name, and what you do?
Yeah. Google your name. I would, if your name is different to, obviously for you, your name is different to what your brand name is, I would definitely Google both and see what comes up. Google your competitors and see what comes up. We have the tools that are, they're all there for us. We don't have to pay any money to kind of use Google at the moment. So Google and see what you get. And actually it's really valid also. So there's a number of resources that you can use, so websites that you can use for SEO, which I can obviously share in the show notes. But again, it's worth putting in there what you think your audience are looking for and seeing what comes out of that as well, because again, it just helps you build a bigger picture. I think so much of PR is actually research rather than kind of the kind of tactics. That bit's kind of the end bit, I would say, but definitely the research is kind of number one and kind of most important.
And when you're talking about contents and topics and what you want to talk about, do you think it's good to go all in on one main focus, or have, a couple of things that you might be interested in or relevant to your business?
I think a couple of things would be better rather than one. You don't want to put your eggs in one basket. And I also think that, we as humans, we pick up lots of things as we go on in life. And I think, I talk about juggling business and being a parent, for example. I wouldn't have probably talked about that maybe 7 years ago. So I think as you kind of go on, you can kind of see what content accurately reflects you. And again, ask your audience, do they prefer more of you talking about X versus Y? And it doesn't need to be like a long drawn out process. I'm not talking about sending forms unless obviously you want to, but you could just ask an Instagram poll, for example. Yeah,
it's a good tip, isn't it? We really have got, contact with our audience at our fingertips. So there's lots of opportunities. So if we were kind of, we've got an idea of what we want to do with our PR, and then we move on to the tactics. Is that right? What sort of things might we move on to and do next?
So Google yourself, as I said. I think that's really important. One of the great things that Google does is that it can alert you to stories about yourself or about your business or about your industry, whatever it may be. So set up Google Alerts. I would spend some time in there. Don't just accept all of the things that it kind of puts on the screen, because you'll be, bombarded constantly with alerts and things which probably aren't relevant. So, it's going to take some time to kind of really hone in on what it is that you want to be known for. But also you might, say to Google, okay, send me this information once a week or once a fortnight. And I think that's really important to see. Again, if you are putting yourself out there for opportunities, maybe you've commented on something, if that piece is published, you will, your name will come up and therefore Google will alert you. Just stops you from having to kind of constantly be searching for things and, trying to find stuff. I think, and this is one that I speak to my clients a lot about, is read the news. It sounds so obvious, but we don't always read the news. And I think maybe it's my experience of working in corporate communications teams. One of the first things that we would do every morning is we would have like a media call where we would talk about the top stories that are in the news, so that we knew that these things were on the news agenda. And actually, if there was something that we wanted to communicate, we could bear that in mind. It could maybe shift what we were talking about, or it might just be related news that's really important that we understand and know about, but also that our leaders and the people that we work with are aware of, because you don't want to send somebody into a room and, they'll be blindsided with a piece of news that they may have missed. So I think it's really important to read, the news. And if you can't do that every day, like I totally understand that, but maybe once a week or maybe a couple of times a week, I think it's really important. And also, if you say that you want to be in Vogue magazine, for example, it's all very well saying you want to be in Vogue magazine, but if you're not reading that magazine every issue that it comes out, how do you know what you're going to pitch for or what piece that you want to be interviewed for? How do you know if the audience is right for you, or if the stories are quite right for you. I think it's really key that you do research. And again, that goes for podcasts as well. You know, you and I both know where we've had people come to us and say they want to be on the podcast and they haven't listened to an episode. So I think you doing PR is, you know, it's a great opportunity for you, but you need to put yourself forward in the best way, best light possible. You need to make it easier for the podcast host or the journalist or the editor. You know, they are all up against stupid deadlines. They're working really, really hard around the clock to get things published and, you know, promoted and printed and, you know, whatever it may be. So your job is to make their job as easy as possible. So I think one of the things that you can do really quite quickly is if you use Google Drive or however you store your information, just set up a little folder, and that can be your press office folder. And in there, you know, you can have everything that you need when you're ready to start pitching to a journalist or a podcast host or whatever it is that you want to do. So that could be things like photography, and that could be headshots of you, you know, high res, you know, good quality images where we can see your face. Because if you're sending photos where you're slightly blurry or, you know, in your holiday gear, is that really kind of the best way that you want to promote your business? Side note, I think photography is so important, and it's a really good and easy way to actually get featured in magazines and newspapers. So definitely invest in good natural photography where you can see your face, you know, try and get different types of images, photos taken where you're kind of maybe not always in kind of the central focus, maybe you're to the side, because obviously they might put copy on the side of your photo. You know, it kind of, it's about thinking again of how magazines and newspapers, online magazines, and, you know, they actually publish stories. So do be aware of that. And then going back to the kind of mini press office folder, you know, have that one-line bio about you, you know, who you are, what you do, what does the business do, your website, all your social channels. Try and have that in one kind of easy place, because when you start pitching, it's really hard to write those emails sometimes. It's really hard to write about yourself. So if you've kind of done that thinking beforehand, literally you can just go into that folder, pick out the things that you need, and, you know, send across the email. Make sure you obviously tailor it to who you're sending it to. Obviously, if you're pitching for a podcast, why do you want to be on that podcast? What is it about that podcast that is of interest to you? Why are you of interest to that podcast's audience as well? You know, spell it out, be really clear, you know, what value and insights are you going to bring to the table? And then the final thing, I know I've just like rambled on lots and lots, but something that is really quite easy to do, and I think, you know, shows that you're reading the news, shows that you're taking an interest in what's happening in the world and kind of what's, you know, happening, is newsjacking. And you can do that really, really simply. You can, you know, read whatever newspaper, magazine, you know, whatever it is that you are interested in. And actually you can share the news that you read, but give your take on it. So for example, you might be a children's party organizer, for example, and you might see a story in the paper of places to visit in London over the summer, not necessarily linked to what you do, but actually is kind of linked to what you do. Why not share that and give your thoughts, opinions, because it sets you out as a thought leader and actually shows that you are reading beyond kind of your industry. You're obviously sharing news as well, which is a great way of connecting with people, and it gets people talking. And I know we've done that before, where I've kind of shared stories with you, Vardeep, about, you know, I can't remember, was it the Tate and Lyle
I think
rebrand,
it was,
for example? And see, that's a great way of getting people talking about branding, but in a way that's accessible. And I guess for you, it's kind of minimal effort, right? Because all you're doing is sharing a story and you're giving your view or opinion and putting it out there and seeing what happens. So that's a really great way of, you know, starting and seeing what your audience is interested in as well.
Do you know what was really interesting about that is that I take it for granted. So I read the branding news and stories, I don't always think about sharing that with my audience because it's just something I'm reading. So it's having that awareness, isn't it, around, okay, I can actually use this rather than having to write a fresh new piece of content.
Yeah. And also how much news and content is out there already. We're not all reading. I mean, I don't know what the brand publications are that you read, but we're not all reading those things. So the fact that, you know, the news, I think it was BBC News site that covered that story, it just goes to show how, you know, of the moment and of interest that particular topic was, you know. And I think Tate and Lyle is an iconic brand, you know, a lot of people also have that kind of element of nostalgia as well. So it's a really great way of engaging people, but in a way that isn't, I don't know, maybe pushy or salesy or kind of quite me. It's kind of a nice way of kind of doing that.
Yeah, absolutely. And because it is so well known and it's, you know, it's been around for so long, a lot of people had their own opinion around it as well. So that was, you know, it's a good talking point as well.
Yeah.
Which is what PR is about. So what are your 3 top tips then? I mean, you've given loads of tips and information there, Rupa, already. My brain is whirring. But yeah, have you got sort of like, you know, if there were just 3 that you could do?
Okay. Number 1, just read more, read the newspapers, read the magazines, research, listen to the podcasts. I think get a really good, clear idea of, you know, what you'd like to do. You know, maybe it's speaking that you want to focus on. So, you know, what events do you want to be known for or speaking at? What have you seen other people, you know, put an announcement about that they're doing and think, God, I really want to do that. So I think definitely do the research, read the newspapers, magazines, podcasts. Yeah, do your research as well. You know, ask your audience, what do they do? What do they read? What do they consume? What makes you a good fit? Ask them about your content. You know, what do they like, not like? I think that's really a helpful conversation to have. I know you said 3. I have 4. Okay. I'm sorry. I can't stick to rules. I think the third one is Twitter, which I know a lot of people, or X, which I just don't like calling it that. I still use Twitter. I go on there quite regularly, maybe a couple of times a day. There's a hashtag, you probably have heard of it. If you haven't, it's called #JournoRequest. Have a look, see what's on there, see the type of things that journalists are asking about. So if you don't know what it is, it's basically a hashtag. Journalists will request maybe interviewees that they want to talk about. Maybe they're writing a story and they want to know some more information. They're looking for subject matter experts. So it's a really good way to have an idea of what journalists are writing about. And if you do pitch yourself for these journal requests and you don't hear anything, you know, you can chase, and that's absolutely fine to do, maybe in a week or 2. Those journalists will often come back to those emails that they might not have responded to. So that happened to me, where I put myself forward for randomly a piece in, I think it was Runner's World or like Running Magazine or something. I'm not a big runner, but look, I was running a lot at the time. It was during the pandemic, and I pitched myself for a piece which was basically all about why you run. And I found the request on Twitter. The journalist didn't come back to me. And then randomly, a few months later, the person that they were going to interview had dropped out. So they asked me if I was interested. And yeah, it kind of worked. And I was featured in that publication. So I think keep up those connections once you start having those conversations with journalists, you know, and event organizers. Keep speaking and kind of keep the lines of communication open. And the final thing I would say, the final tip is about start sharing that content that you want to be known for now. Start building up your blogs or your emails. Maybe it's your social media. Make it really obvious to, you know, the people that you want to attract, as well as your dream clients. You know, if it is the that particular event that you want to speak at, or you have put your company forward for a particular award, make sure that when somebody Googles you, those relevant content themes come up. And the reason why I say that is sometimes, the more random things that you do. So, for example, a business owner might be collecting, I don't know, those little mini toy cars.
Yeah.
Well, there might be a story in the news. Obviously, this is all kind of, off the top of my head, but there might be a story in the news that, one of these mini toy cars is going to fetch, millions of pounds in auction. Journalists and editors on the day of that auction story will probably Google and see who they can get on the BBC News or, on the website that they work on to, somebody that can comment on that story. So it's a really good way of, already starting to think about PR before actually doing anything about PR.
Yeah, it's a really good tip, isn't it? I haven't really used Twitter for a while, actually. But, so it's good to hear that it's still relevant for that sort of side of things. Okay, so what are your recommended resources? So we're looking at wrapping up so much information.
I know.
So what can we go on and look at next? What would be our next steps and some sort of places that we could go and read up more and find out what to do?
Yeah, I think I don't want to bombard you with too much stuff because I feel like I've already shared so much. So I think definitely check out Journo Request on Twitter. I think that's a really good thing to just have a look and scroll and kind of see what's out there. I think if you're looking to do more PR and you're not quite sure where to start, Enterprise Nation is great. Obviously, it's a free resource. You can go on there. There's lots of videos and tutorials about PR. So take a look at that. Obviously, Federation of Small Business as well does something very similar. Lots of how-to guides. Have a look at that. If you're looking for kind of books, there's maybe a couple that I would suggest. So PR for Humans is a really good one. Hype Yourself by Lucy Werner is a really good one as well. I think that kind of goes very much into kind of the steps of how to PR yourself and your business. There's a book that I read recently, which I think you've read as well, Vardy, More Sales Please by Sarah Dalrymple. I think that's a really good book because it focuses on the selling, and we often forget about that. I think you can be selling when you're doing PR, and I think Sarah's model is really accessible and makes it quite easy to follow. I don't think she goes into PR in a great detail, but I think that the techniques and tips that she talks about are useful for PR. And then obviously Donald Miller's Building a Story Brand. I think there's some really good, again, techniques, questions that you can ask yourself around your brand, building this story. We've spoken about this before, but a lot of clients say to me, I don't know what makes me memorable or exciting or interesting. I think there is something in all of us that makes us interesting and unique. It's about, actually tuning into what that is. So I think that's a really good starting point as well.
Yeah, some interesting links there. Yeah, and I've read a couple of them. So it's interesting how they cross over and give the PR element, because they're all slightly different, aren't they, as well?
They are. Yeah.
Oh, brilliant. Thank you so much, Rupa. It's been a really great episode. I feel like I've learnt loads. And my head is full, and I wish I had the scope to make lots of notes. But anyway, thank you so much and giving us the opportunity to learn more about PR, the benefits of it, and how we can get started. You can follow Rupa on Instagram and LinkedIn for more tips and advice, and also subscribe to her newsletter. We will share the details for all of those links in the show notes. And that's it for this week. Please do leave us some feedback and rate this episode wherever you listen to your podcasts. See you soon. Thank you for listening to today's episode. The Courageous Collective is created by Rupa Bharadva and Vardy Pedwoods. We really appreciate your feedback, so please like, share and follow us. Please also subscribe to receive an alert for our next episode.
You can find out where to follow us on social media in the show notes. And if you'd like to be a future guest, please do get in touch. Thanks and see you soon.